Good morning. I am Catherine Reedy of the William Tuffs Chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution of Elkhart. I am also the current regent of the chapter and here to present a program on our chapter namesake, William Tuffs. I would like to present my research on William, and we'll try to connect a few of the dots, a few of the puzzle pieces in his life together and share what I've found on this Revolutionary War patriot buried here in Elkhart County.
Catherine, one other thing I forgot to announce. We are recording this. If you'd be kind enough to turn your cell phones off, or else I will get a picture.
If your cell phone goes off, you owe him $1. Okay? Fair warning. Okay, I'm going to move on. I think it's this side. There it is. I'll get the hang of this. Some have doubted his stories and frequently misquote one of our DAR members of the past, Dorothy Elaine Smith, who wrote a research story kept at the Elkhart Public Library about William and the 4 other patriots buried in our county. She did this in 1986. She said, occasionally stories of William Tuffs' participation in the American Revolution seem to sound as if Tuffs had fought the revolution single-handed. And one can just imagine the old soldier telling tales of it for his family and friends during his sunset years. Some exaggeration might have crept into those stories William told, and that's as far as they go. They forget the next part. However, fortunately, one clear story told by William Tuffs has been passed down to us by the Goshen Democrat. This newspaper gives evidence of William's participation in the Boston Tea Party. A lot has been said and printed about William Tuffs and his Revolutionary War experience over the years. Keep in mind there were approximately 283 recognized battles from 1775 to 1783, and William only told stories of a few of those battles and of his participation in the Boston Tea Party, which occurred in December of 1773. So for DAR purposes, we recognize anything between 1775 and 1783. So the Boston Tea Party is not going to be in our records as patriotic service. So I'll clear that up. So here we go with what I uncovered about William. Oh, that's his monument at Bonneville. It's taller than me. So when I've been out there trying to clean it, I don't do the top. Just because. William was born on June 11th, 1750 in Mystic River area of Medford, Massachusetts. Today, this area is called the Mystic River Basin. William stated June 11, 1750 as his birthday on his pension application for his Revolutionary War service and in newspaper interviews. William related that his father was John Tuffs, an innkeeper about 6 miles out of Boston. Next. There we go. If we think about the times back in the 1760s and 1770s and the Boston area, the Sons of Liberty come to mind. This group of Americans were not happy with British rule, and they met at inns and taverns in and around the Boston area where William lived and grew up. William undoubtedly would have heard the stories of the Sons of Liberty and other men talking about news of the day and new taxes being levied by the King of England. Per Medford history, their townspeople were heavily involved in opposing British taxes and rule during this pre-revolutionary time, as evidenced by protesters at the Boston Massacre in 1770. which included residents from Medford, one of which was 17-year-old John Clark, who was wounded. There were also known Sons of Liberty members living in Medford at the time of the Boston Tea Party. One documented member was John Fulton, whose wife Sarah is known as the mother of the Boston Tea Party, as she helped to disguise and costume many of those participants from Medford who took part. William has stated in his December 17, 1840 edition of the Goshen Democrat his description of what we now call the Boston Tea Party and his participation. His description is quite specific: being in the hold, rolling the boxes, attaching the tackles, and raising them to those above. He continued, after the tea was unloaded, we disappeared and went back home. A few things to know about the Boston Tea Party. It was not called that until the 1830s and 1840s, when authors started writing about the events. Those who participated would use terms such as destruction of the tea, unloading of the tea. Another item is that men who participated were to disguise themselves so that neither friend nor foe could recognize them. This was because if they were caught, they could not identify anyone that was with them. William then went on to say he wore a cap full of feathers, old clothes, painted his face heavily so that not to be recognized. So for being 90 years old at the time of this interview, he still remembered the details clearly. So how did this interview come about? Holy moly, he's 90 years old, living in Middlebury. He decides to tell the newspaper. Well, that's not quite how it came about. William came forward after another Goshen area newspaper published a story, and a Judge Sunsen of Rochester read it. An article about the last survivor of the Boston Tea Party had died. Uh-oh. William was made aware of this and then went to the office of the Goshen Democrat and told the editor, Dr. E.W.H. Ellis, some of his revolutionary experiences, including his participation in the Boston Tea Party. William's recollections were published with the editor, Dr. Ellis, saying of William, retains with much clearness and detail, including the circumstances attending the throwing overboard of the tea. Now, Dr. Ellis, who was this guy? Dr. Ellis was a well-known practicing physician in Goshen, and who better than a physician to evaluate William's mental capacity and memory? And I can tell you, as being an old RN with many years' experience, that when I would be admitting patients and asking them, what surgeries have you had in the past? They could recite every one that they've had for the last 50 years plus, very accurately. They could also tell me the 17 medications they were taking, their names, what color they were, and what for, and the 5 doctors who prescribed them. Better than some 50-year-olds that I admitted. So with this, I'm of the opinion that if a doctor did his interview, he would be the best judge in Goshen to decide about William's memory. Revolutionary War service of William is taken from his pension applications of his rejected 1832 and his accepted 1834 pension application, and from his own accounts as printed in the Goshen Democrat in 1840 and 1845. An important detail about living in Massachusetts, just prior to the start of the Revolution, I'm going to describe here. So this is what William would have been included in. A committee of the First Provincial Congress of Massachusetts in December 1774 recommended that 1/4 of each town's soldiers should equip themselves as Minutemen and be ready on short notice to march in defense of the province. Prior to this in Massachusetts, so before 1774, able-bodied men between the ages of 16 and 60 had already been drilling as soldiers 4 times a year. These local detachments had formed companies that could be sent anywhere without waiting for the organization and training to protect their local communities. That's how they got their name, Minuteman. This would explain in William's pension his April 1775 entry for military service, as this is when the Revolutionary War started at Lexington and Concord, a mere 8 miles from Medford, where William lived. Keep that in mind. There we go. If we look at William's pension applications, and he had 2 due to the first being denied, the U.S. Burial Index of Revolutionary Veterans, and William's stories, this is what we find about his service. U.S. veteran burial records record William was with Colonel Benjamin Gill of Strofton, 3rd Massachusetts Alternate Continental Line in April 1775. Colonel Gill's force is recorded as being in the Battle of Bunker Hill. William had signed up for 3 months and went home after being discharged from Colonel Gill's force. And it was not uncommon for militia members to go home, take care of the farm, take care of the family, and then go back. Now, if they got back and the group that they were with, company or army they were with, was not there, they signed up for whoever was there. So that's why you had this constant, they're here, they're there, they're everywhere. So, not to do Dr. Seuss, but, so anyway, William did like anyone else. He got home, took care of business, and re-signed up. Next up was Colonel Gavenscort's regiment of Albany, New York, which he states he signed up for in May of 1776. William may have meant 1777, as this would line up with the other events he described. But at 90 years old, or between his 80s and 90s for these pension, I'll give him a year he couldn't quite remember. And at that time, he was sent to Lake George to transport supplies across with the ship the Trumbull to Fort Ticonderoga. William said he had been a sailor, which would also make sense in that Medford on the Mystic River, where he was from, was a shipbuilding town. They had a large shipbuilding company there. He told of a story being held prisoner for a month after the Trumbull was destroyed in battle before escaping and going back to Boston in the fall of 1777. This was part of the overall Saratoga campaign at the same time in 1777. That William, he just gets around. Finally, he said he signed up with Colonel Henry Jackson of the Additional Continental Regiment of Massachusetts line in Boston immediately upon returning home. He states he marched to Rhode Island, White Marsh, and Philadelphia, and this brought him to his Valley Forge story of being a teamster before rejoining the regiment in Philadelphia. Colonel Jackson's Massachusetts line was involved in the battles of Monmouth, Rhode Island, Trenton, Saratoga, and Staten Island. William said Long Island in his statement, so he had the islands confused. William, in his rejected pension of 1832, had a few errors, such as 1777, and he meant 1777 instead of 1776, and a captain's name incorrect, but he was at the time 82. William was, this is the big one, William was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. So he couldn't write down his recollections of his Revolutionary War service. He couldn't read them in the history books that had already been written, and he certainly couldn't read the newspaper. So he just had to go what was in his memory. William's second pension application was in September 1834 and was accepted. It had less detail than the first application. In this, he said he was with Colonel Gill again and Captain Cornelius Sanford's company in bringing supplies across Lake George, with both dates and places matching up to those officers' time periods and places. With William's age, memory, and illiteracy, he was able to recall his service in quite detail. He could only speak of his memories. Quite possibly, this was William's way of getting his story out. I know that many military veterans do not talk about what they experienced, but the memories are vivid. When they do choose to talk in later years, sometimes the memories are just as real now as they were years ago, and the details never leave them. They may get dates and places confused, but the memories are there. Oh, this is my favorite part. William told the story in one of the 1845 Goshen Democrat newspaper accounts of his being at Valley Forge and joking with General Washington about some bad cheese he had shared with the general. Yeah, okay. Both men became sick, but dysentery sickness was common at Valley Forge too. According to his pension records, in a story published in the Muncie Post-Dispatch in 1938, a Mrs. Gregory told a story several years earlier that she had met William and heard him tell of him being at Valley Forge and meeting General Washington. He also, in his first pension application in 1832, stated he went from White Marsh to Valley Forge after being hired as a teamster. He may have been selected for this duty, and you'll never guess why. William already had smallpox, and as the disease was very prevalent at Valley Forge in the winter of 77-78, this also lines up with his service under Colonel Jackson that he spoke of. This would be part of the Philadelphia campaign. Now on to the cheese story. It could be some true. Maybe they did have cheese at Valley Forge. Maybe he did say hello to General Washington, and then he elaborated on the story. Maybe, a little. So, I'm just going to tell you real quick. It reminds me of when my family in my younger years camped in a tent at Yellowstone. My dad kept a hatchet under his pillow to protect us from bears, although I don't think that was going to work in a tent very well. Yes, we heard bears during the night banging the garbage lids and then going away. Now my other version of the story, after all these years, is that my dad jumped out of the tent with this hatchet and chased the bears clear to Old Faithful. My point is that I had factual statements mixed in with some stretching of the truth for story purposes, But we're all based on the facts that bears were at Yellowstone. My dad did have a hatchet under his pillow, and yes, those bears were banging the trash can lids at night. So as you can see, the basis for William's story, maybe in the cheese, maybe, I doubt he shared it with George, but I'm just saying it shows that he could remember some facts of where he was at in the time period. Some of the things might have got stretched here and there. So, William, this is where you really, as I was telling this gentleman earlier, for all of you that watch CSI of a certain age, you know how they figure it all out by the end. Well, I look at William's story as a Nancy Drew mystery because I'm of that age, or the Hardy Boys, if you're at that age. After the war, William left the Medford Mystic area for Scolari, New York, where he married and had 3 children. He appears in the 1790 census here in Scolari, which is about 38 miles west of Albany, but it's just William. His wife's name was Sally or Helen, and his children were said to be Helen, William Jr., and John. It is unknown what his occupation was, but I did find that a William Tuffs was paid by a town about 8 miles away from Scolari for sweeping floors of their meeting house. And it was more than one occasion. So it made me think maybe he was like a custodian type. But I can't really prove that's our William, but it makes sense because that's where he was at. So he didn't appear on census records until 1830 in Portage County, Ohio, living with a granddaughter. And she was the key here. Her name was Eliza Dexter Corp. And William, she was William's daughter, Helen, married a David Dexter in New York. And so this is their child and William's granddaughter. It was tough figuring this out. Their daughter, Eliza Dexter, married Seymour Corp in 1829, and they, with William, moved from Ohio to Elkhart County. William was living with his granddaughter, Eliza, on a farm in Middlebury at the time of his death, per newspaper accounts and ancestry records, with her second husband, James Selder, who she married in 1839 after Seymour Corp's death in 1837. Eliza was very hard to track down, as she had been married 3 times. And James Selder was husband number 2. Husband number 3 was a Mr. Trago, and they lived over the Michigan line later. So the Selder farm, where William was located at the corner of County Road 35 and 14, behind the current Northridge High School. Eliza is buried in Gracelawn Cemetery in Middlebury. And how we found it out, we had to, I think Richard, the curator at the Middlebury Historical Museum, and all the books that he has there, to track down our Eliza Dexter Corp Selder Trago. Not easy. When a child does that and it's a woman, it's really hard to track down women. So, now we're on to William passed on September 5th, 1847, and the funeral account in the paper said Middlebury men met at the Methodist Church and planned and carried out a respectful funeral fitting for a Revolutionary War veteran. Over time, the Bonneville Cemetery fell into a state of neglect, and his original tombstone disappeared, and later it was learned it was taken by a very, very, very distant relative for safekeeping. So, in time, his tombstone was replaced by the Modoc tribe of the Improved Order of the Red Man, a fraternal organization who was modeled after the Sons of Liberty. So now you get the connection there. Sons of Liberty, Boston Tea Party, William. In the dedication in 1922 of that large monument, it was listed there were over 2,500 people attending. The stone was inscribed with William was present at the battles of White Plains, Germantown, Monmouth, Bunker Hill, Lundy's Lane, which was the War of 1812, and present at the throwing overboard of the tea in Boston. One little tidbit about this dedication. There was a gentleman there, he was a Civil War veteran, and he got his musket or rifle out from the Civil War, cleaned it up, and he fired the volley over William's grave. He said as a young child he remembered hearing William tell the stories of his Revolutionary War experience and Boston Tea Party experience. So that was his way of paying homage to William. As for the War of 1812 for William, it appears he tried to enlist, but was told he was too old for the New York militia. I have several of my own Revolutionary War patriots. That's what these little bars are. There's 9 of them so far that I've had proven. I have lots more, I just don't have the time. But I have one who served in the War of 1812. I'll just tell you about him. His name was James Dullen, and he was born the same year as William, and he served in the Kentucky militia. So I guess it depended on where you lived, or maybe Kentucky liked having age and experience in their militia as opposed to New York. This photo above popped up on my Facebook memories last week. It is of my grandson James in 2019, who just had a class story of the Boston Tea Party at school, and William was brought up as a participant. James' statement back then, after reading it to me, was that William should have kept some tea for himself, as the British kept it all for themselves. And he also left a luminary light at the cemetery, as he said it gets dark for William out there at night. James and I and my late husband have been decorating William's grave for about 20 years now on holidays, and whenever we're going by, we check on our William. It's interesting there. Oh, just a tidbit. I don't want to go too late, but a tidbit is that Eliza Dexter Court Selder Trago's husband, number 2, James Selder, is buried at Bonneville along with his first wife. So there is some connection there on why William would have been there. Mr. Selder's first wife, I believe, died in 1835 before William. So that would explain why they picked Bonneville, maybe. I'm just kind of guessing here, but it would make sense to me. Go where you know it. And now, so it is my pleasure to announce that William Tuffs, after 252 years, has been added to the official list of the Boston Tea Party participants by the Boston Tea Party Museum in Boston, Massachusetts. And the New England Genealogy Society in December of 2025. He will be honored with a gold Boston Tea Party participant marker. Looks like that. That's from a lithograph at the Smithsonian. and they modeled their marker after that. The ceremony, now get this, I asked Boston, me being me, I found out in February that he got added to the list, so my immediate thing was to email and call him, and I'm like, are we talking about our William? Our William Tuffs? Yes, we are. And I said, really? And they said yes, and he's entitled to the gold marker. And I said, well, let me check on a few things. So I was with Richard Smith at the Middlebury Museum, and I said, hey, if they want to send the marker to a museum, can you take it and we'll figure out something to, have a ceremony for it? He says, sure. So that's where we put our Liberty tree at the Middlebury Museum in honor of William, since he lived there. The ceremony will take place July 25th at 11 a.m. at Bonneville Cemetery. Now, the rest of the story is that I thought they were just mailing the marker here. Who come from Boston to Indiana? Really? I got the email and I was speechless. They sent it to me a few weeks ago. We're planning on coming. Be ready. And I'm like, well, okay. And I still had to email them back. You're coming to Indiana. And they're, yes, we're coming. We personally want to place it on his grave. So William will be the furthest west that they've gone for a participant. And when you look at their records, William is either the last participant to pass away or pretty darn close. So this is a great honor for William to finally get his due. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on our William. And I guess, is there any questions?
Can I just say a comment? I went to Middlebury Elementary School, and we went out to the tombstone on one of our field trips, and I still remember that from probably 4th grade. And so that's why I'm here today, because I was like, well, I want to learn more about him and stuff, so that's awesome.
That's where James was at. He was at Middlebury Elementary, and they did another field trip, but gosh, he'd already been there 100 times, so he probably could have told them all about it. Well, my grandma says. So, yes, you probably went to school with the caretaker. I met him out there, and he's probably about my age. He said, yes, we went on a field trip here, and now he takes care of the cemetery, and he's heard all the stories about William. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Just wondering, is there any record of William Tuffs meeting Edward Bonney? There were some rumors that Tuffs may have taught him to do counterfeiting, which if he's illiterate, I think.
Yeah, I don't, he may have known him because they were both living in Middlebury Township at the time. And when you look around at some of those plot maps in York Township, there was a lot of, I would think that he would have bumped into him, but it seems like Edward Bonney left in the 1830s.
He was in and out. He finally left in 1842 after he was caught counterfeiting in Ohio.
Yeah.
We're going to leave that part out of the application. Yes, sir.
I was curious again. Seems there was considerable doubt as to whether or not he participated in the Tea Party for decades or centuries, and all of a sudden now he's considered legitimate. Is it simply based on the interview with the Goshen Democrat, or was that?
I can tell you that the Boston Tea Party Museum, they work with the New England Genealogy Society, and they review everything that is sent to them, and it's up to them to decide what they want to accept and not accept. So I can't really answer that. You'd have to ask them, the folks in Boston, specifically what they had. Now, they did send me reference work, and they did tell me that he was approved, and there is no doubt with them that he was there. Part of it's, if you think about it, he was illiterate. How was he going to remember those facts at 90 without him being there. He couldn't write it down. He couldn't read about it.
One time it worked in his favor.
Yes. He couldn't read about it. He was moved to New York after the Revolutionary War, so he wasn't surrounded by it
Very
anymore.
few illiterate plagiarists around.
Yeah, so, you know, for the Boston Tea Party Museum and the New England Journal or Genealogy Society, they have certain standards that are listed on their websites. They're standards that they use to accept folks like William. I tell you, in my research, I read time and time again Mrs. Smith's quote, but it always left out the however. There is no doubt that he was there at the Boston Tea Party. They leave that part out and they make it sound like William was just a crazy old man, which he was not. He was, and so a lot of that's been portrayed. But when I look at our chapter, when we were founded in 1924, it has in all our first documents and first descriptions about our chapter, William was a member of the Boston Tea Party. That's what it has about our chapter. And through the years, when I've gone through our chapter records, which is no easy feat for 100 years, we have done, prior regents have done programs on William, specifically that he was at the Boston Tea Party in our records. So I'm just going with, I believe William was there. I've always believed that. As Richard in Middlebury says, until someone can prove he was not there, he was. So I'll just go with Richard, the curator in Middlebury. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm thinking how he had described it, and I'm thinking this maybe the description that was really important because they didn't want to be identified and they didn't want anybody else to be able to identify them. So I can't imagine there were really detailed records of who was there, right?
Well,
And
part of it
so
is that
by his description of what
yeah,
happened,
they really don't know how many men participated because a lot of them went to their grave not telling. Because if you told someone and they weren't the correct person to tell, you and your family might have been killed or imprisoned by the British.
this is very difficult to
So,
determine.
and the circumstances of him living in Boston and his dad having an inn and the Sons of Liberty were in Medford, it's like, okay, it's all, and those were his formative years. He was like a teenager and a young man when it occurred. So I can
What a
see.
great fun thing to do, right?
Yeah, hey, let's have a beer or a glass of ale and head on out, you know? There's a party at this boat, I guess.
Her point is spot on, because all of those guys had to be completely anonymous,
Correct.
and they were committing a felony that never was compensated for against private individuals, as private merchants were ruined. And I had a student many years ago do a project on William Tuffs, and you can probably speak better to this than I, that supposedly there's also archival information in the Mennonite archives at Goshen College. At least that's where she had worked. And one thing that stood out, she said until late in life, he was always so afraid that somebody would find out that he participated. Like somehow somebody would come calling to file suit or lay claim against
Correct.
this. And after the Jay Treaty of 1795, all former debts from America to British merchants or owed to loyalists who were forced out of the country here, those had to be paid
Correct.
before the British would remove themselves from American coast.
And it could be that's why he moved right outside of Albany, New York, because in his travels with whichever army he was with, he was in New York quite a bit. And that could be why he left the Boston area.
So there are no musters of the Sons of Liberty. Like there's no official list, and so her point.
Correct.
I think we can only assume a preponderance of circumstantial evidence to push the case. And I have a feeling your involvement forced them in Boston to go ahead and make the decision.
No, it wasn't me. It came out of the blue to me. I asked them in 2023 when we dedicated the Liberty Tree, hey, can William get a marker? And they said, well, we need to keep investigating him at this time. And then when somebody, I had no idea that they were re-looking at him and posting it in 2025 when they approved him. They didn't email me. They emailed somebody else somewhere and they put it up on Facebook. And I that's why I had to call them. I said, are we talking about our William? My guy? And they said, yes, we are. And I can tell you in one of the conversations with them was that the 1840 interview in person, William gave a first-hand person account. He was also illiterate, so he couldn't have read about it. He was also interviewed by a doctor, if you think about that. Who else to evaluate him but a doctor that was doing the interview? So I don't know how they do things in Boston. I just know that they're coming here and I better be ready. Yes, ma'am.
To that, can you share any more details about the ceremony?
Well, we're in process right now. The Elkhart County Parks Department has given us the Meadows parking area, that shelter. I just have to figure out how to get people from a quarter mile over to the cemetery because we all know how limited it is. If anyone has a bus or a van, please contact me. So we're still in process. I know Boston's coming. I said, it's fair time. I said, you want to see a real fair, county fair? I haven't got a response yet from that. But I don't know how long they're going to be here. They are doing an eyewitness presentation in the Chicago area. I don't know if that's before William or after. So they have different levels, eyewitness, participant, but our William, if you ask me, he was there. So, any other questions?
I have one. Does he
Yes.
have any descendants, and will they be in attendance at the ceremony?
Well, his descendants are hard to track down too. They're kind of like with Eliza and 3 marriages. She did have 2 children. If I can find them, they can come. Yeah. His William Jr. I trying to unravel his line. It's documented, but just trying to unravel it is hard. There was a great granddaughter up in Dowagiac, Michigan, that did come to the 1922 dedication and remembered her dad telling her stories about William and his service. And she signed an affidavit saying that too. I found that. Found a whole lot of stuff. So.
We started this right on time, wanted to be respectful of everybody, so I'm going to go ahead and we'll end the official program right now. You'll be around for a few more questions if you'd like. But let's give a nice round of applause.
Thank you.